The government is set to force Google and Facebook to pay New Zealand news publishers for their work. Plans for new legislation have been signed off by Cabinet and confirmed to Q&A this morning, following similar legislation in Australia and Canada. Voluntary negotiations and a collective bargaining process have already been underway. But the legislation means the tech giants have a finite window within which to sign deals with Kiwi media companies before a government-mandated process takes over. I asked Broadcasting Minister Willie Jackson what the new legislation will achieve.
You know, I'm really pleased that Cabinet has decided to come up with a digital bargaining strategy. This is about a strategy to support the small players to get paid for their own news, for their online news. And the reality is they haven't been paid for years and for the last couple of years. And this is about supporting them. But also, you know, I've been lobbied by the by Pacifica Media, by Māori Media. Everyone wants to get paid by the big guys for this.
Doesn't the spin-off have a deal?
They've got a deal. I think they've got a deal, but you know, you always.
What do you mean you think they've got a deal? You've been lobbied by you, but they've already got a deal, haven't they?
Yeah, but people have to make deals. But the reality is,
no, hang on.
People have to make deals.
Yeah, but if the spin-off's already got a deal, why do they have any skin in the game?
Well, I'm not saying they've got skin in the game. I'm saying that they've been one of the lobbyists in terms of what we should do in terms of doing the right thing. This is the right thing to do. But it's not just about the big guys like spin-off. It's about the Northern Advocate. It's about the Whanganui Chronicle. It's about the Otago Daily Times. You know, journalists today, Jack, we've probably lost 50% of journalists in the last 10 years. We've got to give hope to the small guy, to the small players out there. And so I'm really proud to bring forward this legislation to support them. It'll be a backstop more than anything else, because we're hoping that they will negotiate a good agreement.
So when do they have to have negotiated that agreement by in order to avoid the mandated process? Well,
we're talking about the timeline right now, and we're talking maybe 3 to 6 months we'll give them in terms of trying to reach an agreement. If there's not an agreement, then a mandatory mediation process and arbitration process will be put in place to make sure that a fair deal is rolled out.
That mandated process will presumably favour the media outlets, the small media outlets you're talking about. So why would any media outlets do the voluntary deal right now? Why wouldn't they just hang out for that mandated process?
No, because it's probably because the big players will want to do a deal, and our experience shows us in Canada, for instance, deals have been done everywhere. They've just done 100. They've just done 150 deals, Jack, because they don't want to go to legislation. Right. In Australia, the same thing has happened. Legislation, they don't want to go. They don't want the government stepping in. Same things happen in Australia.
Okay, which organisations have already made deals with Meta and Google?
Well, it's not for me to tell you who's got all the deals.
Do you know?
Yeah, I've got an idea on. Yeah, well, a number of them have spoken to me. A number of them have also said.
Well, which ones are there?
No, it's not for me to tell you who's got the deals. But a number of them have said the deals are not. They're not good.
They're going to have new deals on top of those?
Well, no, it might be their deals, because what I've heard is most of the deals are for 12 months or for 20. So this will be good legislation for them, you know, coming towards the end of their deals. Can I say that I've had representation from those people who've said, you know, we had to do a deal, we had to do something. We don't want to lose journalists. Journalists are being lost everywhere. And as I said, this will be a great backstop, and I'm really pleased. I've been lobbied. I mean, this is like a cry from the industry. They've asked for it. What I did, Jack, was I gave the big players 3 months. Right. I asked them to do deals, the Googles, the Facebooks, and to their credit, they made an effort. You know, and I went to some of their showcases, and I've supported them, and good on them, and well done. I hope they will continue to work in good spirits, and in good faith. That's my hope, anyway.
Right. Have you informed them that you'll be looking at mandating them?
Well, we did last night, and you know, well, the reality is they, you know, I don't think they're too happy, but we must have good lines and good communications with them, because they play an important part in terms of the New Zealand media landscape.
So what happens to the collective bargaining process that had been underway?
Well, the collective bargaining process was granted. The NPA, National Public Association, they got the opportunity, they got the green light from the Commerce Commission in terms of collective bargaining. But the big players have just ignored it. You know, they've been really reticent in terms of trying to negotiate. So it's been a hugely frustrating process. And here's one of the problems. There's a huge bargaining imbalance. That's why we needed the MPA to negotiate in terms of collective bargaining. Small players can't negotiate. There's no equity in terms of how does the Whanganui Chronicle negotiate with Facebook or negotiate with Google. You know, it's really tough. So whilst the green light came in terms of collective bargaining, the big players have been really reticent in terms of coming to the table.
I know that you've based this legislation on legislation in Canada and Australia.
Yeah.
In Australia, I know there is already concern that the legislation isn't working as desired and that money from the big digital players that have come through those deals isn't going to public interest journalism, it's going to shareholders instead.
Right.
So will this legislation have any measure to stop that?
Well, that's what the BSA, Public Standards, Broadcasting Standards Association, that's what they will find out, because they're going to be our regulator with regards to this. So they'll work through this. They'll shape the bargaining process, the framework, in terms of what's going to happen on where it's going to go. The reality is we're talking about $30 to $50 million coming back into the local market. One would hope that it would be going straight to the players. I can't predict exactly what's going to happen.
Will there be anything in the legislation to guarantee that money goes towards journalism, not to shareholders?
Well, you know, that's what I would be pushing for.
Well, you're the minister, so you're drafting the legislation?
Well, that's right. I mean, you know, that makes sense, doesn't it? You know, because that's why we're setting it up. You know, we've got.
Is that something you've planned so far?
Oh, it's something that I've been wanting to do for the last few months.
But specifically that allowance, that you're going to make sure that the money that comes from these big players, once deals are signed, goes to journalists.
Well, that's something that I will try and ensure is in the legislation, because otherwise it's all a waste of time.
Is it something that
otherwise it's all a waste of time.
But is it something that can be legislated?
Well, to put that in legislation, well, I would think so. I think you can probably find. We'll find a way.
You don't know.
No, I do know that you can find a way of framing those types of things without actually saying it. It's a bit like how you interview sometimes, you know.
Let's talk about the merger, and let's hope we can call it the merger, the RNZ TVNZ merger. Right. So select committee process is finished. The committee reports back in January. Yeah. Are you anticipating significant changes to the bill as it stands?
I think there'll be some. Well, I know that there'll be some changes. I can't get into it, obviously, but we heard what the submitters were saying. The majority support the merger, despite what you might have heard from the opposition, with the proviso that there are a number of changes. I think probably 60 to 70% support the merger, but we understand some of the criticisms in terms of editorial control. I think that was one of the main drivers.
Trust, right?
Trust, absolutely. So we'll have to make some. I think we have to make some changes. And you know, I can't say because I haven't got a select committee report back. But one would think that that's the way we might have to look at that. Your people, your CEO made those types of that type of submission. I get it.
You get it?
I get it.
Okay, I want to talk about trust.
I believe in editorial independence.
Well, I mean, some people would look at the bill as it's currently drafted and say you don't, because they'd say that RNZ and TVNZ have more independence enshrined as it stands than they would under this new entity. But I want to dig into the trust issue a bit more. Yeah. What has the public response to the Public Interest Journalism Fund taught you about public trust in publicly funded journalism?
That's a good question. It tells me that people who haven't been receiving funds, who lost support, were very grateful, were very supportive of the funds coming that way. I've seen that at the coalface in terms of Māori.
I'm talking about perception in the government, though. You're talking about supporting the industry. Yeah, but I mean, you've said that trust is the fundamental issue.
Yes.
And so I want to know what's happened to public trust in media, especially through those media organisations that have received government money.
Well, one of the perceptions, if I'm hearing you right, is that the view is that the government might be paying off the media.
You agree that that's a perception?
That's one of the views that was pushed our way. It didn't matter what we said, it didn't matter how we responded. This is about Jackson and them paying off their mates. Well, it never was. It was about us supporting communities and organisations who deserve support. That's why the collective bargaining strategy is so important.
But perception when it comes to trust is just as important as the reality, is it not?
No, sometimes perception is completely wrong. You know?
I'm not asking if it's right or wrong, but I'm saying it's just as important. important. When it comes to an issue of trust, perception is just as important as the reality. So whether or
not sure
not...
if I agree with you on that, Jack.
Okay, so
there's a lot of perceptions that people have.
So you're not concerned that many people would look at, say, this show, for example, and say that received money from the Public Interest Journalism Fund. I don't trust that show anymore.
Yeah, no, I am concerned about that because we have... We've got that type of complaint. Doesn't matter what we say, it doesn't matter the history we give in terms of funding shows like this. There's one view of this is about Willie Jackson paying off Jack Tame. I get that, I get that, but you're never going to change some of those perceptions. The truth is something different.
The truth is, I mean, so you put 50 million in through the Public Interest Journalism Fund. You're going to put 109 million in new funding every year for the new entity. How is that going to improve trust?
Well, put it this way: the 50 million in terms of the Public Interest Fund is finishing.
We get that. How is putting $109 million a year into a new entity going to improve public trust in the media?
Well, it'll improve, so you're coming to the entity now, it'll improve public trust because they will see a better product. What we want
They'll see $109 million a year going straight from the government into a new entity.
Well, it's about investing in our media. It's about investing in our future.
It's about trust. That's what you've said. You've said repeatedly it's about trust.
But sometimes it takes a while to get that trust. You know that. And I think once...
And you can lose it very quickly. And if there is the perception that the government is somehow influencing media because it's giving money to media...
And that's why our bargaining legislation is so important. That's why it's important that they put $30 to $50 million back into the market. That's why we'll have a hands-off policy in terms of the merger.
Let's talk about the hands-off policy. So at the moment you've structured it as an autonomous Crown entity. Now many submissions to select committee suggested the structure as an ACE will undermine public trust in the organisation. It would be seen as being too close to the government. Are you prepared to change that structure? No. The reality is an ACE suits us because the emphasis is on a non-commercial strategy. That's what an ACE is. But it gives less independence than TVNZ or RNZ currently have from the government.
It will be fine because we will look at the areas in terms of editorial independence. We'll make sure there's a distance. ACE is important because the priority here, Jack, has to be a drive in terms of non-commercial programs. It's not all about commerciality. The reality here is that TVNZ, let's come to TVNZ, made a good effort, I think, in the last couple of years in terms of Māori and Pacifica. It's been quite good. Not a bad effort considering 5 years ago the channel abandoned the Māori department, shut the Māori department down, shut the Pacifica department down, and contracted out everything. They followed because they followed the National Party in terms of getting rid of the charter. Now, even though that happened, there's still efforts being made. But what we want to do is entrench a strategy going forward, and that's what this public media entity is all about.
I totally understand that. You want to celebrate more diverse voices.
Maori,
you want to celebrate
Pacifica, Asian, women. We want.
But none of that will be worthwhile if you don't have the trust of the public. And this is the critical
trust takes a little while to get, Jack.
Okay, why is the Establishment Board working in secrecy if trust is so important?
How do you mean working in secrecy?
I haven't seen any workings of the Establishment Board.
Well, the Establishment Board has worked in tandem with some of your people, with your CEO. Your CEO has worked with, have talked to consultants, talked to people right across the spectrum. They've talked to everyone, so I don't accept that they've worked in secrecy at all. In fact, you've had representatives, and you've got representatives, TVNZ, on the Establishment Board.
If trust is so important, why hasn't the government given the opposition an unredacted version of the Aotearoa New Zealand public media business case?
Because some of their information is commercially sensitive, and your people don't want some of their accounts seen by the opposition. So you can't just...
But in the interests of trust, why not air this?
We've given them everything that they need.
No, you haven't. You haven't given them an unredacted business case.
I've had my officials meet with Melissa Lee. She's been into my office.
Has Melissa Lee had an unredacted business case?
No, but because we're still trying
trust.
No, but the trust is also in us. We've got to protect people who don't want some of their commercial accounts revealed to everyone, Jack. So it's not. You might say trust, but we'll lose trust pretty quickly if we reveal those accounts, and we have to cover that. But I have no problem and have had no problem meeting with Melissa and with anyone who wants to talk about the merger.
So over the course of this program, you have inadvertently undermine trust in the House when it comes to RNZ and TVNZ. And you said that you'd misspoken, so it's really important to note that. But you've publicly pressured one of the organisations, namely Te Reo Tātaki, about a change in culture.
Are you talking about yourselves?
No, you've chosen an entity structure that is arguably less independent than RNZ and TVNZ are today. Your establishment board hasn't publicised its workings so far. You haven't released an unredacted business case or the legal advice explaining why. How can you possibly expect the New Zealand public to trust whatever entity resolves?
Listen to what the submitters say in terms of the select committee. 60 to 70% of the submitters support the entity. They want a few changes, particularly around the editorial side. You're doing a very you're doing such a negative interview today. I'm very disappointed in you, but you're hammering every part of this entity. That's all about our public identity. It's about expression in terms of the New Zealand voice. Don't you want to hear that? You guys,
fundamentally, the submissions may have supported the concept of an entity,
60 to 70%.
It's how you've structured it through this bill that they have.
Well, we're not finished yet, Jack.
Okay,
we've got the select committee coming back.
You've just drawn on the select committee. So this is from Koi2, the Centre for Informed Futures, a neutral, I think we would agree, arbiter in this situation. Quote, the bill lacks mechanisms to generate vital public trust. This includes robust representative governance and oversight that guarantees demonstrable independence and freedom from influence. That's a massive concern.
Well, as I said, we've heard it all. You haven't heard the select committee report
back. But you said you're going to keep the autonomous Crown entity structure.
Well, absolutely, because the focus has to be on non-commercial, on not being commercial, and the ACE fairly represents that.
What guarantees are there that funding will be maintained for the entity across different political cycles?
Well, one would hope that your mates in National will act responsibly if we have a change of government.
That's the guarantee. One would hope.
If we have a change of government in 6 years.
The guarantee, though, is...
so if we have a change of government in 6 years...
Yeah, I'll give you that one.
Okay.
But one would hope. That's the only guarantee.
But there's no guarantees in terms of what happens in politics, sadly, Jack. I would hope that opposition parties would act responsibly. So there's nothing to stop National coming in, say, in 12 months' time, and instead of scrapping the new entity, completely... underfunding it, so it's essentially well, you and I both know National have underfunded everything. They underfunded the health system.
There's nothing to stop that, though, right?
The education system. They underfund everything. What we do is double up.
There's nothing. You haven't asked my question. There's nothing to stop that, though, right?
There's nothing. Look, tomorrow they could abandon the treaty. If you have a new government coming in, particularly if David Seymour's involved, they might want to abandon the Treaty of Waitangi. There's plenty of things they could do. How
much money is going into independent consultants working on this entity?
Oh, well, you've seen the numbers in the last couple of days, Jack. You tell me. Yeah, I have.
What are they?
I didn't know you were going to. Well, you tell me. It's a few million.
No, come on, please. You're all over it.
What you want to know? You want to know
how many? How many millions of dollars?
I think it's just under 4 million, Jack.
Does that include Deloitte's fee?
Well, that's a further 5 million, isn't it? Okay. You already knew that, didn't you, Jack?
Well, I'm just interested. So
you already knew that.
17 contractors have been hired at an average price of between $5,000 and $6,000 a week. So at a time when Kiwis are facing massive financial pressures, how can you justify that kind of spending?
Well, the reality is that's the cost that you have to get in terms of specialists. That's what they cost. And that everybody always looks sideways when you bring that specialist advice in. And it is specialist advice because in terms of culture and heritage, you've got 189 employees there who don't have the expertise that some of these contractors have. You have to hire that type of expertise.
Expensive specialist advice.
The reality is we've set aside 40 million in terms of getting the merge up and running, and that's part of it.
You say specialist expertise is important. Does Deloitte have any experience setting up public media entities?
No, it's not. It's not about that. It's about they have plenty of experience in terms of
accounting,
in terms of business. They've got about 20 different strategies happening at the moment in terms of the strategy going forward. In terms of Deloitte's, and sometimes that is just what governments have to pay. All governments have to go through this type of process.
What's the rush?
The rush for
passing this?
Because, as you know, the world is changing. we've got declining revenue, we've got declining audiences. In terms of TVNZ going forward, I mean, this is probably, things might not be sustainable unless we invest now. And we have, look, you could end up being the front man for Treasure Island. You might not be.
Dreams are fake.
I mean, you might end up there because there might be no Q&A the way that we're going because the audiences are declining, the revenue is declining. We have to invest in
how complex this is, right?
We have to invest in a public media entity, which is TVNZ and RNZ, and we think it's a good idea. So do many people in terms of the industry, and it's worth the investment.
But people think the concept in the broadest form is a good idea. But they're concerned about all of the detail. Yeah, again, I'm going to go back to Koitu. We're concerned that this bill, which will be a cornerstone for the sector for some decades, is so incomplete and raises so many issues, it would be unsafe to enact it in its present form. You know how complex this area is. Why not take just a little bit longer to make sure you get all the details right?
We believe in a strong public media entity. That's what we want. We want something like the ABC.
I know, but you haven't answered my question. So why not take longer to make sure you get that right?
I'm answering your question. We've been working on this for some time. We want a BBC, we want an ABC, we want a protection of New Zealand media, we want a New Zealand voice out there. We want New Zealand stories, we want Māori stories, Pacifica stories, Asian stories, and we want shows like this to be focused on. And it's urgent, given the way the world is working in terms of media. The whole media landscape has changed yet.
No, I understand that, which is all the more reason to make sure you get the details exactly right.
If you wait and wait and wait, I think we've got the goodwill of a lot of the public. I feel that when we're out there, we've got supporters, people like you, of course, a bit disappointing.
So time frame. Committee reports back January. But we're looking House doesn't sit till mid-February.
Yeah, March the 1st is...
so how many sitting days have you got to pass this?
I'm not sure of the
next year.
Here's the dates. We're looking at...
You can have about 8 days, aren't you? 8 or 9 days?
We should get it through. If we don't get it through, we're looking at March the 1st to July the 1st.
Is there a chance you won't get it through?
At the moment, I don't. I think we will get it through.
But is there a chance?
No, I wouldn't think. I wouldn't think there's a chance that we'll miss it.
You don't seem 100% committed there.
Well, there's not a lot of time left. We can't afford to miss.
No.
In terms of things, but if you keep doing negative interviews like this, you won't help, Jack.
What is the likelihood that you will delay this bill and its progress?
What is the likelihood?
Yes.
That we would delay this bill?
Yes, that you would delay it.
And what are you
got that
about?
March 1st deadline. What is the likelihood you would delay this?
Look, if we miss a couple of dates, it might be a little bit later, but it won't be much later.
How much later?
A week or two. A week or two, if we no, because you got to remember we're coming back. I think we're coming back on
mid-February,
February 14th.
So what is the likelihood that you will scrap these plans before the next election?
No, well, at the moment, no likelihood whatsoever.
Zero. You're going to go into the next election telling the New Zealand public we're going to spend $109 million and a cost of living crisis every single year on a new media entity that the public isn't sold.
You know, life has to go on, Jack. You know, we've invested more money in this cost of living crisis in the health area, in the housing area,
I get that.
And in the education area.
You're not going to scrap it, though.
No, hold on. Those are huge priorities for us. So, you know, we've got a big change in terms of Farm Act. There's lots of priorities happening.
Yeah.
Broadcasting is also a priority.
Okay.
You can't just get rid of everything because we've got a cost of living crisis.
Is it true you're considering Simon Bridges as chair of the new entity?
That's going through the process at the moment. I can't talk about that. Well, we've got a number of people who are up for the board.
Including Simon Bridges?
I can't comment on that.
You would just say no if he wasn't in there.
No, I just can't comment on the process.